"Name your price," his rival said. "The maid," Korean Mafia Boss replied, pointing to the black maid. Olivia was invisible. Just a maid enduring cruelty in Derek's household, until one ruthless negotiation changed everything. When Mafia Boss Jin Woo is given the right to claim anything to end a feud, he shocks the room by choosing her. What begins as a cold transaction becomes a dangerous act of protection. But when Claire and Derek cross a line, refusing to let go of the girl they once owned, Jin Woo proves that touching what's his comes at a devastating price. Welcome back, my amazing viewers. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching from. Now, back to the story. Olivia kept her eyes downcast as she refilled wine glasses. Her hands steady despite the ache in her ribs from where one of Derek's guards had shoved her into a doorframe that morning. Pain had become a familiar companion during her years in this household, as constant as the contempt that followed her through these halls. Derek sat at the head of the long mahogany table, his fingers drumming in irritated rhythm against the armrest of his chair. Across from him sat Jin Woo, composed and unnervingly calm, his dark eyes revealing nothing. The tension between the two men was palpable, a living thing that had been growing for months, fed by business disputes and personal slights that had escalated into something that threatened to consume them both. Today's meeting was supposed to end it. This feud that had cost both men time, money, and reputation. Olivia moved along the perimeter of the room like a shadow, trying to be invisible. She had learned that invisibility was survival in Derek's house, but invisibility was a luxury rarely afforded to her, especially when Claire, Derek's sister, was present. "More wine," Claire snapped, not bothering to look at Olivia as she thrust her glass forward. Claire was draped across her chair, with calculated elegance, her designer dress probably worth more than Olivia would earn in a year if Derek ever actually paid her what he owed. Claire's eyes, however, were fixed entirely on Jin Woo, her lips curved in a smile that was all predatory interest. Olivia approached and reached for the glass. As she poured, her hand trembled slightly, just barely, but enough. A single drop of wine splashed onto the pristine white tablecloth. "You clumsy little wretch." Claire's voice cut through the room like a whip. She turned to Jin Woo with an exaggerated expression of dismay. "You see what my brother has to tolerate? Completely incompetent? I keep telling Derek he should just throw her out on the street where she belongs." Heat flooded Olivia's cheeks, but she kept her eyes down, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth off. Derek laughed, a cruel bark of amusement, while his guards smirked from their positions along the wall. This was entertainment to them, her humiliation, a brief diversion from the tedium of their day. "My apologies," Olivia whispered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "Oh, she speaks," Claire exclaimed mockingly. She leaned toward Jin Woo, placing her hand on his arm with deliberate intimacy. "You know, some people simply aren't meant for better things. They're born for scrubbing and servitude." Her fingers traced a pattern on Jinwoo's sleeve as she gazed up at him through her lashes. "Unlike us, wouldn't you agree? We understand quality, refinement, what it means to be exceptional." Jinwoo's expression remained neutral, though something flickered in the depths of his eyes. He gently removed his arm from Claire's grasp and leaned back in his chair. "Shall we conclude our business?" he asked, his voice quiet, but carrying an authority that made Dirk straighten slightly. Derek waved his hand dismissively. Yes, let's end this tedious affair. You wanted to negotiate, so negotiate. What will it take for you to back off and let me conduct my business without your interference?" Jin Woo was silent for a long moment, his gaze moving slowly around the room. It passed over Derek's smug expression, over Claire's eager face, over the guard standing at attention, and finally it landed on Olivia. She felt the weight of that look, felt seen in a way that was both terrifying and strangely compelling. His eyes held hers for a heartbeat. 2, 3. "You said I could choose anything to end this feud," Jin Woo said slowly, still looking at Olivia. "Anything at all?" "Within reason," Derek said impatiently. Money, property, business, concessions? Name your price. Jin-woo turned back to Derek, and when he spoke, his voice was perfectly clear. I choose her. He gestured toward Olivia, the maid. I want her. The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum of sound that seemed to suck the air from the room. Then Derek began to laugh, a genuine belly laugh of disbelief. The guards joined in, their guffers echoing off the walls. Clef's face contorted with confusion and then indignation. The maid, Derek gasped between laughs. You're joking. You must be joking. This is absurd, Claire shrieked, her composure shattering. You want that pathetic little servant over me? Over an actual partnership with this family. She shot to her feet, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. She's nothing. She's worthless. She's enough. Jinhwa's voice cut through the laughter like a blade. He stood slowly, and the laughter died in throats, choked off by something dangerous in his tone. I don't recall asking for commentary. Derek, you gave your word, anything I wanted. Do you intend to go back on that word in front of witnesses? The amusement drained from Derek's face, replaced by calculation. You're serious completely? Derek shrugged, his indifference more cutting than any insult. Fine, take her. Good riddance, honestly. One less mouth to feed. He waved his hand as if brushing away an insect. She's yours. We're done here. Claire's face had gone blotchy with rage. You can't be serious, Derek. You're just going to let him. He's not worth this. Is humiliating. The only thing humiliating here, Jinwoo said softly, but with an edge of steel that made Claire step back, is how you've all treated her. We're leaving. He crossed the room to where Olivia stood frozen, still clutching the wine bottle like a lifeline. Come with me, he said, and this time his voice was gentle, almost kind. Now, Olivia's mind reeled. Nothing made sense. This had to be some elaborate joke, another form of torture. But Jinhwa's hand was extended toward her, and his eyes held something she hadn't seen directed at her in so long, she'd almost forgotten what it looked like. Respect. Her legs moved, before her mind fully decided. Carrying her toward him, she sat down the wine bottle with shaking hands and followed Jinwoo from the room. Walking past Claire's furious face, past Derek's dismissive sneer, past the guards who looked on with confusion. The night air hit her face as they exited the estate, cold and sharp and real. A sleek black car waited in the circular driveway. Jinwoo opened the passenger door, waited for her to get in, then closed it carefully before moving around to the driver's side. The leather seats were soft, impossibly soft, and smelled of expensive cologne and something else, something like safety, though Olivia didn't trust the feeling. As Jinwoo pulled away from the estate, the building growing smaller in the side mirror, Olivia found her voice. It came out smaller than she wanted, but defiant, despite her fear. Why? She asked, turning to look at his profile illuminated by the dashboard lights. Why did you choose me? Jinhwa's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles going white. The muscle in his jaw worked, and when Olivia looked closer, she could see the barely controlled anger still simmering beneath his composed exterior. He didn't answer, didn't even look at her, just kept his eyes fixed on the road ahead as they drove into the night. The mansion materialized from the darkness like something out of a dream, all clean lines and warm light spilling from tall windows. Olivia pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the car window, watching as they passed through wrought-iron gates that opened silently at their approach. The grounds were immaculate, even in the dim evening light. Manicured gardens flanking a circular driveway where a fountain stood silent, its water stilled for the night. Jinwoo parked in a guard around to open her door. Olivia stepped out onto smooth stone pavers, her worn shoes looking shabby against their perfection. She clutched her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how threadbare her maid's uniform had become, how the hem was coming loose on one side, how there was a stain on the sleeve she'd never quite managed to scrub out. This way, Jinwoo said, his voice still carrying that careful neutrality from the car. He led her up wide steps to double doors that opened into an entrance hall that made her breath catch. Where Derek's estate had been all cold marble and harsh angles, this space breathed warmth. Rich hardwood floors glowed under soft lighting, and the walls were painted in colors that reminded her of sunset, cream and gold, and the palest amber. An older woman appeared from a side corridor, her gray hair pulled into a neat bun, her expression kind but curious. "Mr. Jinwoo, welcome home. Mrs. Kang, this is Olivia. She'll be working here as my personal maid. Could you show her to the east bedroom and make sure she has everything she needs?" The older woman's eyebrows rose fractionally, but she nodded. "Of course, sir. This way, dear." Olivia glanced back at Jinwoo, but he had already turned away, disappearing down another corridor without a backward look. She followed Mrs. Kang up a sweeping staircase, her fingers trailing along the smooth banister, still trying to convince herself this was real. "Here we are," Mrs. Kong said, opening a door on the second floor. "Your room." Olivia stepped inside and stopped. The space was larger than any room she'd ever occupied, painted in soft lavender with white trim. A four-poster bed dominated one wall, dressed in linens that looked cloud-soft, and there was an actual sitting area with an armchair positioned near a window that overlooked the gardens. Through another door, she glimpsed white tile and gleaming fixtures, a bathroom of her own. "This can't be right," Olivia whispered. "Servants don't stay in rooms like this." Mrs. Kong's expression softened. Mr. Jinwoo was very clear about the arrangements. "This is your room. The closet has some clothes that should fit you until we can get you properly outfitted. Bathroom's through there. Fresh towels in the cabinet. Is there anything else you need?" Olivia shook her head mutely, and Mrs. Kang withdrew with a gentle smile, closing the door behind her. Alone, Olivia moved deeper into the room, touching things hesitantly, as if they might disappear. The bed was real, the mattress yielding when she pressed her hand against it. The window opened at her touch, letting in night air that smelled of jasmine and fresh earth, instead of the stale, recycled air of the servants' quarters at Derek's estate. She found the clothes Mrs. Kong had, mentioned simple but well-made pieces in her size, including a proper maid's uniform that wasn't threadbare or stained. In the bathroom, she spent long minutes under a shower that had perfect water pressure and unlimited hot water, washing away months of grime and exhaustion and fear until the water finally ran cold, and she emerged feeling almost human again, but sleep wouldn't come. Olivia lay in that impossibly soft bed, staring at the ceiling as moonlight painted shadows across it. Her body was exhausted, bone-deep, tired, but her mind raced in endless circles. Why had Jinwoo chosen her? What did he want from her? The fear she'd kept at bay through the shock of the evening came flooding back. Men didn't claim women the way he'd claimed her, without expecting something in return. She'd escaped one hell. But what if she'd only traded it for another prettier one? She watched the moon arc across her window, counting the hours until pale grey light crept across the sky, and she heard the house beginning to stir below. Giving up on sleep, she dressed in the new uniform, braided her hair with practiced efficiency, and ventured downstairs. Mrs. Kang found her in the kitchen looking lost. "Couldn't sleep?" the older woman asked knowingly. "First nights in a new place are always hard. Come on, let's get you some breakfast and I'll go over your duties." The duties were shockingly mundane. Olivia would maintain Jinwa's personal spaces, his bedroom and private study, ensure his schedule ran smoothly, handle his drawer, cleaning and meals. There was no mention of anything else. No coded language about special services, no knowing looks. Mrs. Kong treated it all as perfectly ordinary, as if beautiful young women were acquired in business negotiations every day and put to work as simple housemaids. By mid-morning, Olivia was dusting Jinwa's study, a magnificent room lined with books and dominated by a massive desk positioned before floor-to-ceiling windows. She'd seen Jinwoo only once in passing, and he'd merely nodded at her before continuing his phone conversation. Still distant, although warm at her, not as cold as the night they arrived. as if the passion he'd shown when defending her to Claire had been a momentary aberration. The days began to develop a rhythm. Jin-woo was everywhere and nowhere, a constant presence that somehow maintained perfect distance. He never touched her, never made inappropriate demands, never looked at her the way Derek had. Yet he seemed always aware of her, appearing whenever she needed something, solving problems before she could voice them. On her 5th day, disaster struck. Olivia was cleaning Jinwoo's bedroom when her sleeve caught the edge of a vase on his dresser, a beautiful piece of deep blue porcelain with gold accents. She watched in horror as it toppled as she lunged for. It had missed as it shattered against the hardwood floor in an explosion of ceramic shards. Her hands shook as she knelt to gather the pieces, her mind already calculating the cost. Months of wages, maybe years. Derek would have beaten her for this, would have docked her pay until she was working for nothing. The fear was so familiar. It felt like an old coat settling around her shoulders with comfortable weight. What happened? Jinwoo's voice came from the doorway. Olivia kept her head down, her fingers bleeding where sharp edges had cut her. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was an accident. I'll pay for it. I'll work however long it takes. Please, just Olivia." He crossed the room and knelt beside her, his hands carefully taking her bleeding fingers. "Stop. Look at me." She forced herself to meet his eyes, expecting anger, disappointment, calculation of her debt. Instead, she saw only concern. "It's a vase," he said quietly. "Objects break. Accidents happen." He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wrapped it around her bleeding hand. "Mrs. Kong keeps a first aid kit in the kitchen. Go clean these cuts properly. I'll handle this. But it must have been expensive. I don't care about the vase." Something in his voice made her believe him. "I care that you're hurt. Go." Olivia went, her mind reeling once again. That night, she lay in her beautiful room and tried to understand the man who had claimed her like a possession, yet treated her with more respect than anyone in her entire life. She didn't understand him, but slowly, treacherously, she was beginning to trust him, and that terrified her most of all. The doorbell rang with an aggressive insistence that made Mrs. Kong frown as she answered it. Olivia was polishing silver in the dining room when she heard the familiar grating voice that made her stomach drop. "Where is he? I need to see Jin-woo immediately." Claire swept into the entrance hall like a storm system, all sharp perfume and sharper edge. She wore a dress that was more suggestion than garment, red silk that clung to every curve and plunged dangerously low. Her heels clicked against the hardwood with staccato precision as her eyes scanned the space with predatory intent. "Miss Claire," Mrs. Kong said, with professional coolness, "Mr. Jin-woo is in a meeting. If you'd like to make an appointment, I'll wait." Claire's gaze landed on Olivia, who had frozen in the doorway with a silver candlestick still in her hands. A slow, cruel smile spread across Claire's painted lips. "Oh, how perfect. The little servant girl can keep me company. You," she pointed a manicured finger at Olivia, "take me to Jinwoo's study now." Mrs. Kong's expression showed clear disapproval, but she nodded to Olivia. "Show Miss Claire to the sitting room. I'll inform Mr. Jin-woo of her arrival." The walk down the hallway felt endless. Claire followed close behind. Close enough that Olivia could feel the heat of her presence, could smell that overwhelming perfume that probably cost more than furniture. When they were out of Mrs. Kong's earshot, Claire leaned in, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Enjoying your little fantasy, are you?" Her breath was hot against Olivia's ear, playing house in his mansion. "Pretending you're anything more than a novelty that'll wear off. You're just his newest toy, sweetheart. And toys get broken when he's done playing with them." Olivia's jaw clenched, but she kept walking, kept her spine straight. She'd survived worse than Claire's poison. "He'll get bored," Claire continued, her heels clicking faster to keep pace. "Men, like Jin-woo always do, and when he does, where will you go? Back to the streets. At least with Derek, you knew your place. You're just deluding yourself into thinking you matter." They reached the sitting room, and Olivia gestured inside with a trembling hand. Please wait here. Claire's hand shot out, gripping Olivia's wrist hard enough to bruise. Listen to me carefully, you little nothing. I'm going to make Jinwoo an offer today, and when he accepts it, and he will, you'll be right back where you belong. On your knees, scrubbing floors, being reminded every day that you're worthless. Derek was right to treat you the way he did. You're not meant for anything better. Let go of her. Jinhwa's voice cut through the air like a blade. He stood in the doorway, still in his business attire. His tie loosened and his expression was terrible. In its controlled fury, Claire released Olivia immediately, her face transforming into erring smile. Jinwoo, finally, I've been waiting. What are you doing in my home, Claire? The coldness in his tone would have frozen fire. Claire's smile faltered, but held. I came to make you a business proposition, one I think you'll find quite attractive. Jinhwa's eyes flicked to Olivia, taking in her pale face, the red mark on her wrist, where Claire had gripped her. Something dangerous flickered in his expression. Olivier, you're dismissed. Thank you. Olivier fled gratefully, but she didn't go far. She found herself in the hallway just around the corner, close enough to hear their voices. Unable to make herself leave, she told herself she needed to know what Claire was planning. But the truth was, she needed to know what Jinwoo would say. Let's not waste time with pleasantries, Claire said, her voice taking on a business-like quality. I know you've been wanting the waterfront territory that Derek controls. It's prime development land worth millions. I can get it for you. In exchange for what? Give her back. Claire's voice hardened. Return the maid to Derek's household, where she belongs, and the territory is yours. It's a simple transaction, Jinwoo. Property for property. You have to admit it's a much better deal than whatever momentary satisfaction you're getting from your little act of charity. The silence that followed was so long that Olivia's heart began to pound. She pressed her back against the wall, her hands fisted in her uniform. Of course, he would take the deal. Men like Jinwoo didn't refuse profitable business arrangements for the sake of a maid. Why would he? The territory Claire was offering was worth infinitely more than she could ever be. No, the word was flat, final, absolute. What? Claire's voice pitched higher with disbelief. Jinwoo, be reasonable. You can't possibly. I said no. Jinhwa's voice remained level, but there was steel underneath. And let me make something perfectly clear, Claire, so there's no misunderstanding. Olivia is not a bargaining chip. She's not a piece of property to be traded or returned. She is under my protection, and she will remain under my protection for as long as she chooses to stay here. This is insane. She's just a servant, a nobody. She is mine to protect. Jinwoo interrupted, and his voice carried a weight that made Olivia's breath catch. And I don't give up what's mine. Not for territory, not for money, not for anything. Now, get out of my house. You're making a mistake. The only mistake was yours coming here and thinking I would ever consider your proposition. Leave now, before I have security escort you out. Olivia heard the sharp click of Claire's heels storming away, heard Mrs. Kong's calm voice directing her to the exit, heard the door slam with enough force to rattle the windows. She stood frozen in the hallway, her mind racing, her heart doing complicated things in her chest that she didn't want to examine too closely. She didn't see Jinwoo approach until he was standing in front of her, his expression unreadable. I know you were listening. Heat flooded her cheeks. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Don't apologize. He studied her face for a long moment. You're WRISTE. Let me see. She held out her arm and he examined the angry red marks Claire's fingers had left, his jaw tightening. I'll have Mrs. Kong bring ice. It's fine. I've had worse. The words slipped out before she could stop them, and his eyes darkened. That needs to stop being your measure of acceptable treatment. They stood there in the hallway, the afternoon light slanting through the windows, and Olivia felt something crack open inside her chest. All the questions she'd been holding back, all the confusion and fear and desperate need to understand came flooding out. Why? Her voice broke on the word. Why did you really choose me? Why won't you trade me for something valuable? Why do you protect me when you barely speak to me? I need to understand. Jin-woo was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he gestured to his study. Come with me. She followed him into that book-lined sanctuary, and he moved to the windows, his back to her, his hands in his pockets. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, lower, more vulnerable than she'd ever heard it. I'd been watching Derek's operation for months, surveillance, gathering information, looking for leverage, and I kept seeing you. He turned to face her. The way you held yourself, even when they were cruel. The way you never completely broke, never let them destroy whatever it was inside you that kept you standing. I watched you endure things that would have shattered most people, and you just endured. Olivia wrapped her arms around herself. You felt sorry for me. No, the word was fierce. That's not it at all. Pity is passive. Olivia, pity looks away. What I felt was rage at the injustice of it. You had dignity and strength and grace, and they treated you like nothing. They were blind to what was right in front of them. I'm just a maid. You're so much more than that. He took a step closer. When Claire stood there humiliating you, when they all laughed, I realized I had a chance to do something that wasn't about business or strategy or winning. I could choose justice. I could choose to recognize your worth when everyone else saw nothing. But I don't understand what you want from me. I want you to be safe, Jin-woo said simply. I want you to sleep without fear. I want you to heal from what they did to you. I want you to remember that you're a person who deserves respect and kindness. That's all. That's everything. Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. You don't even know me. Then let me learn. Something shifted in his expression. Vulnerability breaking through that careful control, if you're willing. The air between them felt charged, heavy with possibility, and the weight of truths finally spoken. Olivia looked at him, really looked at him, and saw past the cold exterior to the man underneath. A man who had seen her when she was invisible, who had chosen justice over profit, who protected without asking for anything in return. I'm willing, she whispered, and in that moment, something fundamental changed between them. Two broken people seeing each other clearly for the first time, beginning to understand that healing might be possible, that worth could be recognized, that protection could transform into something deeper if they were brave enough to let it. The change began with small things. A week after their conversation in the study, Jin-woo appeared in the library where Olivia was dusting and simply asked, "Do you like to read?" She'd frozen, cloth in hand, uncertain if this was a test. I used to before. Before what? Before I didn't have time anymore. Before reading felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. She traced the spine of a leather-bound volume. Before I forgot there was more to life than surviving it. Jin-woo pulled the book from the shelf and handed it to her. Take it, read it. That's not a request from an employer, Olivia. It's a suggestion from someone who thinks you might enjoy it. She did enjoy it. That night, curled in her armchair, as rain pattered against the windows, she devoured the first 3 chapters of a novel she'd heard about, but never imagined she'd hold in her hands. It became their ritual. Mornings over coffee, Olivia, no longer standing at attention, but sitting, talking, debating the merits of fictional characters and plot twists. Jin-woo's reserved exterior began to crack, revealing a man with strong opinions about literature, a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard, and a smile that transformed his entire face when she managed to coax it out. "You're different than I expected," she told him one morning, 3 weeks into their new dynamic. "How so?" "Warmer, funnier, more odd." She searched for the word human. "I could say the same about you." His eyes held hers over the rim of his cup. "You're not the terrified girl who asked me why in the car anymore." "I'm still terrified sometimes," she admitted, "just less frequently." "Of me? No." The truth of it surprised her. "Not of you. Of this ending. Of waking up and discovering it was all temporary." Jin-woo set down his cup carefully. "What if I told you it doesn't have to be?" The conversation shifted, then deepened. He told her about his childhood, raised by a father who valued success over everything, who taught him that emotions were weakness and vulnerability was failure. He explained how he'd built walls so high that he'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone in, how the business world had only reinforced those lessons until he became the cold, distant man everyone expected him to be. Until you, he said quietly. You made me remember that walls keep things out, but they also keep you trapped inside them. Olivia shared her own story in fragments over the following weeks. The parents she'd lost young, the aunt who'd taken her in only to exploit her labor, the string of households where she'd learned that kindness was rare and cruelty was casual. She told him about the dreams she'd abandoned, the art she used to love creating, before exhaustion stole her passion, the person she'd been before the world had tried to grind her down to nothing. Show me, Jinwoo said when she mentioned her art. I haven't drawn in years. I wouldn't even know where to start. The next day, a full set of professional art supplies appeared in her room with a note in Jinwoo's precise handwriting. Start anywhere. Start now, she cried when she saw them, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that someone believed she was worth investing in. That night, she made her first tentative sketches, her hand remembering what her mind had tried to forget. Jinwoo's study became their sanctuary. Evenings found them there. Olivia curled in the leather chair by the window with her sketchpad, while Jinwoo worked at his desk, the comfortable silence between them speaking volumes. Sometimes he'd look up and find her watching him, and instead of the fear that might have been there weeks ago, he saw curiosity, warmth, something that made his carefully controlled heart beat faster. What are you drawing? He asked one night. She hesitated, then turned the pad around. It was him, captured in charcoal, his expression thoughtful as he read, the evening light catching the angles of his face. But she'd drawn something more than his features. She'd somehow captured the loneliness he carried, the vulnerability he tried to hide, the man beneath the armor. Is this how you see me? His voice was rough. Yes. She met his gaze. Is it wrong? No. He stood and crossed to her, studying the drawing more closely. It's the most seen I've felt in my entire life. Their wood hands brushed as he handed back the sketchpad, and neither pulled away. The touch lingered, transformed from accidental to intentional, fingers intertwining in a moment that felt both terrifying and inevitable. Olivia, he said softly, I need you to know this thing between us. It's not about gratitude or obligation. You understand that, don't you? Then what is it about? Recognition. He lifted his free hand to her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. I see you. Not the maid, not the victim, not the person they tried to make you believe you were. I see the woman who survived impossible things and came through, still capable of hope, still capable of this. Of what? Of letting someone in, of trusting again, of being brave enough to believe you deserve more than just survival. I'm afraid, she whispered. So am I. His admission cracked something open between them. I've spent my whole life protecting myself from feeling too much. And then you walked into my world and suddenly, all those walls I built feel like a prison instead of protection. Olivia stood closing the small distance between them. She was still shorter even in her shoes. Had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. What if we're both brave together? His answer was in the way he pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her with a reverence that stole her breath. The next day, Olivia stood in Jinwoo's study doorway, his black card gleaming between her fingers. I'm just going to the supermarket. I'll be quick. Jinwoo looked up from his laptop, his expression immediately shifting to concern. Take the full security detail. Jinwoo, it's just groceries, Olivia said with a soft smile. I don't need 4 bodyguards to buy vegetables. After everything with Claire and Derek, it's been weeks. They know better than to come near me now. She walked over and kissed his cheek. 1 guard, that's my compromise. Jinwoo studied her face, seeing the independence and confidence she'd gained since coming to live with him. He didn't want to cage her, didn't want her to feel like a prisoner in her own life, but his instincts screamed, danger. 1 guard, he finally conceded. Mi-John stays close and you call me if anything feels off. I promise. She squeezed his hand. I'll be back before you know it. 20 minutes later, Olivia was in the produce section of an upscale market, Minjin keeping a respectful distance while remaining alert. She was comparing apples when a familiar voice cut through the ambient noise like glass. Well, playing house with Jinwo's credit card. I see. Olivia's stomach dropped. She turned slowly to find Claire standing 3 feet away, Derek beside her. Claire wore expressions of pure malice, though something desperate lurked beneath Claire's perfectly applied makeup, while Derek's face was malice mixed with amusement. "Keep walking," Olivia said quietly, her voice steady, despite her racing heart. "I don't want trouble." "Of course you don't," Claire sneered, stepping closer. "You want to keep pretending you're something more than hired help playing dress-up." Mijin moved forward immediately, positioning himself between Olivia and the siblings. "Miss Olivia, we should go." "The guard dog speaks," Derek said with a cold laugh. "Tell me, does Jinwoo make you watch her 24/7? Must be exhausting babysitting his latest charity case." I said, "Keep walking." Olivia's voice hardened, but Claire grabbed her arm before she could step back. "Don't you dare walk away from me," Claire hissed. "You think you're better than me now? You think because Jinwoo decided to play savior that you actually matter?" "Let her go," Mijin ordered, reaching for Claire's wrist. Suddenly, 4 men materialized from different aisles. Derek's security. They surrounded Minjin, blocking his path to Olivia. "I wouldn't," Derek warned. "We just want to talk to her. Remind her of a few things she seems to have forgotten." Olivia tried to pull free, but Claire's nails dug into her arm. "Forgotten what? That you're cruel. That you spent months making my life miserable. That you're nothing." Claire's voice rose, drawing stares from other shoppers. "That Jinwoo will get bored and throw you away like the trash you are." She shoved Olivia hard. Olivia stumbled backward, her hip colliding with the sharp corner of a metal display rack. Pain exploded through her side as she crashed to the floor, her hands catching her fall, but her elbows scraping against the tile. "Miss Olivia." Mijin lunged forward, but Derek's men grabbed him, 4 against 1. Derek moved toward Olivia as she struggled to her feet, clutching her injured side. "You need to remember your place," he said coldly, reaching for her. Mijin fought like a demon, landing a solid punch that sent one man reeling, but the others overwhelmed him. In the chaos, his hand found the emergency beacon on his watch, a direct alert to Jinwoo. "Get away from me," Olivia gasped, backing against the shelving as Derek advanced. Claire followed, her face twisted with jealous rage. "He's going to realize what we all know, that you're worthless, and when he does, you'll have nothing and no one, because you've burned every bridge, thinking you're special." The automatic doors at the front of the store burst open with such force that several people screamed. Jinwoo strode through like an avenging angel, 6 of his men flanking him. His eyes swept the scene with terrifying precision. Mingan restrained, Olivia on the ground bleeding, Derek and Claire standing over her like predators. The temperature in the store plummeted. "Get away from her." Each word was a bullet, cold and precise. Jinwo's men moved with military efficiency, pulling Derek's security off Mijin and creating a protective barrier around the scene. Other shoppers backed away quickly, sensing the danger crackling through the air. Derek released Olivia immediately, stepping back with his hands raised. "This is a misunderstanding." Jinwoo wasn't listening. He moved straight to Olivia, dropping to his knees beside her. His hands were gentle as he assessed her injuries. The scrape on her elbow, the way she held her bruised ribs, the fear and pain in her eyes. "Did they touch you?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but everyone heard the lethal promise beneath it. Olivia nodded, and something flickered across Jinwo's face that made even his own men tense. He stood slowly, turning to face Derek and Claire. The control he was famous for had shattered, replaced by cold, calculating fury. "You put your hands on her," Jinwoo said, his voice deadly quiet. "After everything, after I made it clear what would happen." "It was just we were talking," Claire stammered, finally realizing the magnitude of her mistake. "There are cameras," Jinwoo said, gesturing to the security R system witnesses. "I can see the bruises forming on her arm from your grip. I can see blood." Jinwoo, Derek tried. No. The word cut like a blade. You had your chance. Multiple chances. But you couldn't let it go. You saw her happy, saw her thriving, and you had to try to drag her back down. Jin-woo took a step forward, and both Derek and Claire visibly flinched. His men moved closer, awaiting orders. The entire store had gone silent, everyone frozen by the tension. "I'm going to destroy you," Jin-woo said simply, not quickly, slowly. "I'm going to dismantle everything you've built, every connection you have, every shred of power you think you possess, and you'll know exactly why it's happening. Please." Derek's composure cracked completely. "We'll apologize. We'll stay away. Whatever you want, what I want," Jin-woo said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried through the store, "is for you to understand what it feels like to be powerless, to be at someone else's mercy, to hurt." He turned back to Olivia, his expression transforming from rage to concern as he carefully helped her to her feet. She winced, leaning against him. "Jin-woo," Olivia said softly, her hand on his chest. "Please, let's just go. After what they did, I know." Her voice was steady despite the pain. "I know you want to make them pay right now, but I just want to leave. Please." The battle raged across his face, every instinct screaming for immediate retribution, wearing against Olivia's plea. His jaw clenched so hard it looked painful. "Please," she repeated, her eyes searching his. "Take me home." The tension stretched impossibly tight. Jin-woo's men were ready to move on his command. Derek and Claire looked terrified, finally understanding they'd crossed a line there was no coming back from. Finally, Jin-woo's hand came up to cup Olivia's face with infinite gentleness, despite the rage still rolling off him in waves. "Okay," he said, "just to her. We'll go." He turned back to Derek and Claire one final time. "This isn't over. Not even close. What happens next will make you wish you'd never learned her name." Then he carefully lifted Olivia into his arms, cradling her against his chest, as if she were made of glass. Minjin and the other guards formed a protective circle around them as they walked out, leaving Derek and Claire standing in the wreckage of their own making. In the car, Jin-woo held Olivia close, his hand trembling slightly as he brushed hair from her face. "I should have insisted on more guards. You couldn't have known." "I should have." His voice cracked. "They hurt you and I wasn't there. But you came," she whispered, resting her head against his shoulder. "You always come." As they drove away, Olivia could feel the storm brewing around Jin-woo, the careful, methodical fury of a man who'd been pushed past his limits. Jin-woo carried Olivia into the mansion, his jaw locked tight, his eyes dark, with barely contained fury. He settled her on their bed with infinite care, personally tending to each injury, cleaning the scrape on her elbow with gentle precision, pressing ice to her bruised ribs, his hands trembling slightly despite his careful control. "I'm okay," Olivia kept saying, but he wouldn't stop until he was satisfied she'd been properly cared for, until he'd catalogued every mark Derek and Claire had left on her skin. When he finally stepped back, his phone was already ringing. He ignored it, his attention solely on Olivia, but she saw the storm building behind his eyes, the cold, calculated rage of a man who'd reached his limit. "What are you going to do?" she asked softly. Jin-woo's expression hardened. "What I should have done the first time they touched you." He kissed her forehead, then retreated to his office. Through the door, Olivia heard his voice, low, controlled, and absolutely ruthless. He was making call after call, each conversation brief and devastating. Jin-woo had built his empire on strategy, connections, and an impeccable reputation for being fair but unforgiving to those who crossed him. He'd always operated with restraint, with calculated precision, but Derek and Claire had made a fatal miscalculation. They'd hurt the one person who'd made him believe in something beyond power and control. Now he unleashed everything. Within 2 hours, Claire's leases were terminated, the property owners suddenly remembering clauses that allowed immediate eviction for code violations. Jin-woo moved through his network like a scalpel, cutting away every support Derek and Claire had relied on. He didn't threaten, he didn't bluster, he simply made it clear to everyone in his sphere: Anyone who did business with Derek or Claire was choosing them over him. In this city, no one was foolish enough to make that choice. By midnight, 3 of Claire's boutiques were closed. Derek's bank had called in his business loans, demanding immediate payment he couldn't possibly make. Suppliers were cancelling contracts. Partners were withdrawing. Their carefully constructed empire was collapsing like a house of cards. Jin-woo worked through the night, methodical and merciless. When Olivia found him at dawn, still at his desk, surrounded by documents in his phone, he looked exhausted but grimly satisfied. "Have you slept at all?" she asked, setting down a cup of coffee. "No." He pulled her onto his lap, wrapping his arms around her waist and burying his face against her neck. "I needed to finish it." "Is it finished?" "Almost." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes still carrying that dangerous edge. "By tomorrow, they'll have nothing left. Everything they built, every ounce of power they thought they had gone." Olivia traced the line of his jaw. "You're scaring me a little." "I'm scaring myself," he admitted. "I've never felt like this. This need to completely destroy someone. But every time I close my eyes, I see you on that floor bleeding and scared, and I can't." His voice broke slightly. "I can't let that go unpunished." She pressed her forehead to his. "I know, and I'm not asking you to. They deserve consequences. I just don't want this to consume you." "It won't," he promised. "Once they understand what they've lost, and why. Once they've paid for what they did, then it's over. Then we move on." His phone rang again. He glanced at the screen and a cold smile crossed his face. "It's Derek," he answered on speaker. "Yes, Jin-woo, please." Derek's voice was desperate, stripped of all arrogance. "Please, we need to talk. Everything is falling apart. The investors, the properties, the bank." "Yes, I know. I arranged it." Silence, then a choked sound. "In one day, you destroyed everything we had in one day. You hurt Olivia. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences?" Jinwa's voice was ice. "You had every opportunity to learn this lesson. I took her from your house. I warned you at the negotiation. I made it clear what would happen if you came near her again. But you couldn't help yourselves. We made a mistake." Derek was openly crying now. "A terrible mistake. Please, Jin-woo, I'm begging you. Tell me what you want. Anything, I'll do anything." Jin-woo looked at Olivia, and she saw the question in his eyes. She nodded slowly. "You want me to stop?" Jin-woo said. "Then you and Claire come to my home tomorrow at 2 o'clock. You apologize to Olivia, a real apology. You acknowledge every way you've hurt her, humiliated her, dehumanized her. You get on your knees if necessary, and you make her believe you understand what you did." "We will," Derek said immediately. "I swear we'll be there." "Thank you, Jin-woo. Thank you. I'm not doing this for you." Jin-woo cut him off. "I'm doing it for her because she deserves to hear you admit what you did. She deserves that closure." He hung up without waiting for a response. Olivia was quiet for a moment, processing. You really did destroy everything they had. Yes, no apology in his voice, no regret. That's terrifying power. "I know." He cupped her face gently. "But I've only ever used it for 2 reasons. To protect what's mine, and to ensure people face consequences for their cruelty." Derek and Claire spent years hurting people weaker than them. They needed to understand what it feels like to be powerless. And tomorrow you get your justice. You get to see them acknowledge what they did. And then he paused. "Then you decide if we're done or if I keep going." She studied his face. "You'd really let me decide? You're not my possession, Olivia. You're my partner. This is your justice to claim, not mine." His thumb brushed across her cheek. "Whatever you choose, I'll support you." The next day, at exactly 2 o'clock, Derek and Claire arrived. They looked nothing like the arrogant people who'd tormented Olivia at the supermarket. Derek's expensive suit was wrinkled, his face haggard. Claire's designer dress hung on her frame, her makeup unable to hide the exhaustion and fear in her eyes. Jinwa's men escorted them to the sitting room, where Olivia waited, Jin-woo standing protectively beside her chair. The siblings looked small, diminished, standing in the grand room that showcased everything they'd lost. For a long moment, no one spoke. "Well," Jinhwa's voice was sharp. You asked for this meeting. Make it worth her time. Derek stepped forward first, and to Olivia's shock, he dropped to one knee. Olivia, his voice broke. I'm so sorry for everything. For how I treated you when you worked in my home. For standing by while my staff abused you. For letting Claire humiliate you. For putting my hands on you yesterday. Tears streamed down his face. He didn't deserve any of it. You were just trying to survive. And I made your life hell because I could. Because I never saw you as a person who mattered. Claire stood frozen, pride and shame wearing across her face. Derek looked back at her. Claire, after a long moment. Claire lowered herself to her knees beside her brother, though every movement screamed reluctance. She looked at Olivia, and something in her expression cracked. I was jealous, Claire whispered. From the first moment Jinwoo looked at you, I saw something in his eyes he'd never given me, and I hated you for it. I wanted to destroy you because if I couldn't have his attention, I didn't want anyone else to have it. She wiped tears away angrily. But that doesn't excuse what I did, how I treated you, the things I said. He didn't deserve any of it. The apology hung in the air. Olivia sat very still, processing words she'd never imagined hearing from these two people. You made me feel like I was nothing, Olivia said finally, her voice steady but emotional. Every single day you found new ways to remind me that I didn't matter, that I was less than human. Do you understand what that does to a person? Yes, Derek said, his voice raw. I understand now. I'm so ashamed. I thought I was powerful, Claire added, her composure finally breaking completely. But real power isn't making others feel small. You were stronger than me every day. You survived my cruelty with your dignity intact. I see that now. Olivia stood slowly and walked toward them. They looked up at her, waiting for judgment. I'm not going to say I forgive you, Olivia said quietly. I'm not there yet, and I may never be. What you did left scars that won't disappear because you apologized. She took a breath, feeling Jinhwa's presence behind her, supporting her. But I accept your apology. I hear that you understand what you did was wrong, and I won't ask Jinwoo to destroy you completely. Relief flooded both their faces. But if you ever come near me again with anything other than respect, there won't be a second chance. And I want you to prove this apology is real. Volunteer. Work with organizations that help domestic workers. Public acknowledgement of how you've treated service staff. Genuine change in how you conduct your businesses if you rebuild them. Derek nodded vigorously. We will, I promise. Olivia looked at Jinwoo, who squeezed her hand but remained silent. This was her moment, her decision. You can go now, Olivia said. Derek and Claire scrambled to their feet and left quickly, escorted out by Jinwoo's security. When the door closed, Jinwoo pulled Olivia into his arms. How do you feel? Free, she said, surprised by the truth of it. I thought I'd feel triumphant or vindicated, but mostly I just feel free, like I finally closed a chapter I've been stuck in. You are magnificent, he murmured. Strong, fair, merciful, watching you claim your justice. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes intense. I've never been more in awe of you. Olivia smiled, feeling peace settle in her chest. Thank you for giving me the choice, for letting me decide how this ended. Always, he promised, kissing her softly. You're not someone I protect from the world, Olivia. You're someone I protect while you face the world. There's a difference. And Derek and Claire, I'll ease the pressure gradually. If they honor their commitments to you, they can rebuild, but they'll never forget what it cost them to hurt you. As evening fell, they sat in the garden together. Olivia curled against Jinhwa's side, watching the sunset paint the sky in gold. What happens now? She asked. Now Jinwoo pressed a kiss to her temple. Now we live our lives. We build our future. We leave Derek and Claire in the past where they belong. He tilted her face up to his. Now I spend every day showing you that you were never nothing. You're everything. Everything, she teased gently. Everything, he confirmed. My partner, my equal, the woman who made me believe in something beyond power and control. You made me believe in us, Olivia, in building instead of destroying, in being better. You were always capable of better, she said softly. I just helped you see. It then let me spend the rest of my life proving you right. 3 months into the incident, Jin-woo asked Olivia to meet him on the mansion's rooftop. She'd been up there before. It was a beautiful space transformed into a garden with flowering plants and comfortable seating offering panoramic views of the city. But tonight it was different. Strings of lights glowed warmly overhead, and candles flickered on every surface, creating an intimate oasis above the world. What's all this? She asked, but her heart already knew. Jin-woo stood in the center of the space, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked nervous. When I first saw you in Derek's household, you were surrounded by people who couldn't see your worth. I told myself, I chose you to give you justice, to recognize what they refused to see. But the truth is, you chose me. You saw past the walls I'd built, past the cold exterior, to the man underneath, who was just lonely and broken and desperate to be seen. He took her hands, his thumbs tracing circles on her palms. You made me want to be better. You taught me that strength isn't the same as hardness. That vulnerability isn't weakness. That love is the bravest thing we can choose. Together, we're more than we could ever be alone. And I want that. I want us for the rest of my life. He knelt, and Olivia's breath caught as he pulled out a small velvet box. The ring inside was stunning, a deep blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds, unique and perfect. Olivia, will you marry me? Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, then found a voice. Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and when he stood, she threw her arms around him, laughing and crying simultaneously. You gave me a life worth living, she whispered. How could I say anything but yes? They set the date for 3 months later, wanting something intimate rather than the society spectacle people expected. The wedding took place in the mansion's garden on a perfect autumn afternoon, surrounded by only their closest friends and the staff who'd become family. Mrs. K cried through the entire ceremony. Jin-woo's business partners looked on with barely concealed shock at seeing their ruthless colleague transformed by love. But none of it mattered to Olivia as she walked down the rose-petal-strewn aisle toward the man who'd saved her, by letting her save him in return. Late in the evening, as they slow danced to music that drifted through the garden, Olivia looked up at her husband, and smiled. What are you thinking? Jin-woo asked, his hand warm on her waist. That we saved each other. We did. That we're going to have an incredible life together. We are. He pulled her closer. Always and forever, remember. Always and forever, she echoed. Two people who'd been denied by the world, who'd found in each other not just love, but home, danced in their garden under the stars. They'd walked through fire to find each other, survived darkness to reach the light. And now they faced a future limited only by their courage to keep choosing each other every single day. It was enough. It was everything. It was theirs.